Welcome to the AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, my guest is AJ McGowan. He's with AutoVision, a part of Reynolds and Reynolds. Welcome, AJ.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
Where are you at today?
So I'm located in Northern California. We like to say sort of Silicon Valley adjacent, but yeah, up in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Cool. I'm coming to you from Atlantic City, New Jersey today. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like to get started with a little bit just about you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the career path that brought you to where you are today with AutoVision?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I think when they're saying it nicely, I'm a serial entrepreneur. So my background, is primarily in sort of big data services, cloud compute, sort of core internet infrastructure. I've had several companies that have been sort of built in that space. I got into automotive because actually my wife is cousins with my co-founder's wife, Lyle Dizon. Lyle owns a car dealership up in Northern California, and he and I sort of became friends over the years. And he started talking to me about the automotive business and some of the challenges that he was facing, and the ways that the tools he had access to, and the ways that he was able to purchase cars, and how all of it was sort of a little bit antiquated and disconnected. And the more we talked about it, the more excited I got about the opportunity, and we decided to take a crack at sort of bringing some of that expertise in big data and analysis together with his expertise in the automotive space, and that's sort of how AutoVision was born.
Cool. Well, let's talk about a problem that every dealership has, or maybe an opportunity. How has managing used vehicle inventory changed over the past few years? With the shortages and the increased demand and price and interest rates. I mean, how's that changed?
Well, how has it not changed? I think it's probably the operative question. It's been a crazy roller coaster of the last few years. When we started the company a little over 5 years ago, the internet had really sort of changed the game for auto dealers in general. And then obviously and created a ton of, margin compression and sort of this race to the bottom on pricing. Then you go into pandemic and you have shortages and all these other things. Where you sit today is it's really hard to find good inventory. I mean, you're having to pay up, at sort of the highest possible price point in order to get used cars on the lot in the first place. But it's hard to find them. And that's why we really think that it's more important than ever to have access to the kind of data that we can bring to the table with AutoVision that helps you to analyze how that market looks in real time on every car. Because not only is, the market sort of tightened, it's become harder to find the right inventory. To your point about interest rates, it's harder for consumers to buy the car that they want. But things keep shifting, month over month and quarter over quarter. The market's sort of going up and down in these, very large swings. And so having access to real-time data to, help you understand what's happening and make great decisions is just more important than ever.
Yeah, the one thing that hasn't changed is customers still want to buy your car for wholesale, and they still want retail for their trade, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Although wholesale prices look a lot more like retail a few years ago. So
Yeah.
maybe they were right all along.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of the challenges that dealers are facing today and what they can do about them. Like what do you see out there?
Yeah, well, I mean, the problems that exist, across the board from a data perspective, really still exist outside of AutoVision. Things like, listings that were once listed on a dealer website 6 months ago, but are still showing up in the data set of some tools because they use aggregators and kind of get their data from a bunch of different third parties. The inaccuracy of the data, we call those ghost cars, by the way, not just around Halloween, but all the time, where you think they're in the market, but they're not, or they're priced a certain way, but they're not. When you have inaccurate comps, when you're looking at a set that isn't really reflective of where the market is, combined with the volatility that we were talking about a moment ago, and that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, if you were holding on to a Tesla, back just a few months ago, as things started to bottom out in the Tesla market, and thinking that the price was here when in fact all of your competitors were already starting to wildly discount, you get upside down really, really quickly on some of those units. And then, on top of that, with the inventory shortage the way that it is, and there was a time where a franchise dealership wouldn't touch a car that had over 100,000 miles on it, right? Some of them not even over 50,000 miles. They just take those and send them straight out to wholesale. Yeah, but as we sit today, their options are much more limited. They're having to hold on to those cars to try to get vehicles wherever they can, whether it's at auction or buying direct from consumers, going through sites like Craigslist or AutoTrader or any of these other sources. And what that means is ultimately they're having to cast a wider net to get the kind of inventory levels that they need to give consumers choice. And so the other big piece of the puzzle here, and part of the magic of combining AutoVision with the rest of the Reynolds retail solution, including Recon Track, is being able to get more accurate recon data, being able to assess those vehicles, understand how you're going to be priced in them, and be able to make an accurate assessment, track your recon costs throughout the life cycle of that vehicle. So, all of these factors sort of interplay together to create problems for dealerships, and that's hopefully what we're solving for them.
Oh, well, you mentioned the importance of having accurate data, and I mean the Tesla example is a great example. I mean, right now with the cost of floor plan and how difficult it is to find inventory, dealers are looking in places that maybe they weren't looking before. There's definitely a danger there if you don't have the right data. What can dealers do to make sure they have the right data? Like, how do they know that they're making choices based upon the best data available?
It's such an interesting question because we look at it as sort of two big facets, right? One is the quality of the data input. So, things like the ghost cars that I was talking about a second ago, if you're not vindicating properly and so you're getting the wrong trim, all of that stuff just can't happen if you're going to be able to make an accurate decision. So, that's a big chunk of the puzzle that we focus on at AutoVision, is making sure that source data is accurate. But then the second piece of it is a little bit more of a nuanced question, because this notion of sort of what is the right way to look at the market, is not necessarily true. If you're let's say a Honda dealership and you're looking at a late model Accord that's got low mileage, you're potentially going to CPO that car. You're going to move somebody off that isn't going to buy a new car. You've got a lot of different options that maybe the Ford dealer down the street is going to look at that vehicle completely differently. And so one of the things that we do fundamentally differently in AutoVision is we bake in the dealer's viewpoint of the market, who they believe their competitors are, people they might want to specifically exclude if there's, let's say national retailers that are in their market and, are sort of always overpriced because they provide a different kind of service and have a different consumer that's really their consumer base. All of those things can be baked into AutoVision so that the dealer's seeing not so much like what we or a book provider or somebody like that might say is the right number. What they're seeing is the actual number, right? We do all of the math for them and all of the heavy lifting and sort of data science, but fundamentally what they're seeing at the end of the day is the number that bakes in their business model, their experience, over 20, 30, 40 years, however long they've been in market, of understanding who their competitors are, who their consumers are, what types of vehicles they can move quickly. And that's really the big philosophical difference for AutoVision, is that we don't have an opinion about what the right number is. We think our dealers are smart and they just need access to really easy to use, powerful tools that let them crunch the numbers the way that they want to see them so that they can save time. They can save time, they can automate processes, they can do things more routinely and regularly. So when we talk about the right data, what we mean is the data that they want and the way that they want to see it.
I got you. So you're saying that we would probably give heavier weight to the cars on the lots that are right next to me, but maybe less weight to the stores that are not franchise auto dealers that maybe deal with a subprime customer because their prices may not reflect what my customers are seeing.
Yeah, that's a great example. Or on a more rare car, one of the things AutoVision will do is we automatically expand and contract not only the geographic distance on every single vehicle that you're analyzing, whether it's when you're appraising it or you're looking at it from a merchandising perspective. We're always looking at the market every day to say, hey, maybe yesterday there were a ton of these vehicles within 10 miles of you. And so that really was the market for consumer. They weren't going to go further. But a bunch of those sold yesterday. And so today that market is more like 30 miles out, right? Or for a very rare car, maybe it's going to be 150, 200 miles out, because if somebody really wants that car, they're going to order it or they're going to be willing to drive for it. So AutoVision does, all of those things every time that you're looking at a vehicle, and then also, plugs in all of your preferences and your view of the market to make sure you're getting that right number.
So once the dealer has access to the best available data and it's presented to them in the format and I guess with the weightings that make the most sense for their particular personal business, what's the upside? How does that impact their business?
Yeah, so I mean, we really look at it as sort of three, key components. So the acquisition component is, of course, sort of the most obvious one. You need a tool like AutoVision and access to data like this when you're going to buy a car for all of the reasons that we just talked about, where you need to understand what your exit strategy is going to be when you're looking at that vehicle, so that you understand what you can afford to make an offer on it. But the second piece of the puzzle is around recon. As you move that vehicle through the recon process, we have tools in AutoVision that'll do things like we have an OBD2 scanner so that you can get all of the codes directly out of the vehicle. We have an inspection tool so that you can improve your inspection processes as you're, kind of going through the trade process. But the reality is that, something always gets missed, and you discover it when you go through recon, and you're trying to figure out how much money are you going to put on this car. Having those two systems talk together is incredibly important, and something that really, exists today, and something that we think is critical and have really been focused on now as part of Reynolds with our sister company, ReconTrack. So making sure that you understand when you're doing recon, if I'm going to put a $3,000 transmission on a car that I'm only going to be able to make $1,000 on, that doesn't make any sense. Those types of insights are sort of critical. The third place is merchandising. So as that car comes out of recon, you put it into the market, understanding where your competitors are, sort of every day. I was talking about earlier the automatic market expansion and contraction. AutoVision actually does that for our dealers every single day. We will reanalyze the market for every one of the cars that they have in inventory and show them, here's where your rank has gone up or down. Here's the new competitors that have entered into your marketplace. Here's where you've fallen out of the parameters that you want to be within a certain, percentage of market. We proactively automate a lot of those processes so that as they're merchandising that vehicle, they know where they're always sitting as they go through the life cycle. The common theme that we really focus on in all of these things is once you can trust the data, then you can start to automate some of these processes and really streamline it. I like to call it putting time back on the clock, right? Where, once you might have had this race to the bottom because you're just trying to sell the vehicle as quickly as possible. Now there's so much more of a focus on profitability and on efficiency. Having access to the right data at every step in the process really helps you to streamline that and to make good decisions as you go through that entire process.
Well, AJ, I'm assuming you'll be at NADA. Where can we find you? And do you have anything super cool and fun that you'll be, launching or announcing at NADA?
Sure. Yeah. So you can I'll probably be back and forth between the Reynolds booth, and we're sharing a booth with ReconTrack. So it's 2963W is the Reynolds booth, and 3157W will be the ReconTrack and AutoVision booth. And we've spent, the last few months, we were required, back over the summer, we've spent all of that time really sort of digging in, integrating deeply into the full Reynolds retail management solution, as I mentioned earlier, with a real emphasis on the integration with ReconTrack to provide sort of that complete end-to-end vehicle management solution that's accurate in every single phase and, efficient in every phase of the car process. So without, giving up too much of what we're going to be unveiling, I think you can expect to see some really, really exciting things coming from us as part of the Reynolds family.
Great. Well, I look forward to seeing you there. Is there anything more you'd like to share with our audience today, AJ, before we say goodbye?
I think maybe the only other thing that I would share is, our DNA, as I mentioned earlier, on the AutoVision side is really about sort of big data and analytics from my perspective, and from my co-founder, 20 plus years in the car business. Everything that we do in AutoVision, we don't believe in sort of black magic and behind the curtain type of stuff. If you stop by the booth and we can give you a demo, you'll be able to see stuff that looks like magic, because it's easy. But you always have the opportunity to sort of dig in and to look at our work, see exactly what we're doing, fine tune it. As I said earlier, our philosophy, just to reiterate, is that dealers are smart, they know what they're doing, and they need access to the kinds of tools that are going to help them to compete in this really rapidly evolving marketplace.
Well, thank you for coming today, AJ, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this AutoSuccess Executive Spotlight. I'm your host, Brian Ankney. Today, my guest has been AJ McGowan from AutoVision, a part of Reynolds and Reynolds. We hope to see you again on a future episode. This one's Over the Curb and Burning Gas.